I wake up every morning just crying, thinking this is not going to be what's going to happen every single day. It's just so hard to get through it. I just don't know how to get through it.
Tell me about his childhood. Did he play sports? Was he in scouts? What kinds of things did
Yes,
did
he
do?
played sports. He played sports from the time he was 5 years old up until he was 17. And he was in basketball, he was in baseball, he was in football, and loved NASCAR. He and his dad went to the NASCAR races all the time. Loved sports, loved sports. And he was a good kid. Had two best friends, and that's who he grew up with, and still are friends with them today. And there's nothing that would have predicted any of this could have ever happened.
Yeah.
Nothing in his childhood at all. I would have never in a million years thought something like this could happen to him at all.
You didn't see things like him getting into fights? Or...
No fighting. He was quiet, and he got along with people, and he didn't start anything, and he was a perfect teenager, tell you the truth. He did not even rebel. He wanted to go to NASCAR Tech. We made that possible for him.
What did he do after he finished school?
He worked at the dealership as a service technician and was making good money and loved it. He bought a toolbox, and he started buying his tools, and enjoyed it. He was doing well.
When and where did he meet Shannan?
They met, and he liked her, she liked him, but it didn't, I don't think it was love at first sight or anything. They took a little while and I guess got to know each other and, dated. It was always a little strange that she always said a lot of things about Chris in front of me that I didn't like. Like, this isn't the kind of person I would date. He doesn't know how to do this, or he doesn't know how to do that. He looks like a skater boy. Look at his hair. Look how much stuff he puts on his hair. It was just on and on and on, and I just got a bad feeling.
And they got married in 2012. Did they get married in North Carolina?
They did. Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Oh, we didn't attend.
Really?
Mm-mm. We didn't attend because Shannan and I just couldn't get along, and I didn't like the way she treated him.
What do you know about their marriage and their issues?
Oh, very little, very little. You can only observe. I could only observe what I saw when I was around them. Christopher always seemed anxious, and he when she needed something, I mean, he would run. He wouldn't walk, he would run, he would get it. He just always seemed to be right there at her beck and call.
And did that seem odd to you? Or?
Very odd. It was very odd. He just seemed nervous.
So how much did you see them over these last 6 years?
Probably twice a year. We would go up there.
Did you stay with them, or?
Yeah, we would stay with them and stay a week and then come back home.
Tell me about Bella and Celeste.
Oh, Bella was just like Chris, just like him, shy, cautious, conservative. Cece was a ball of fire. I mean, she was fearless, completely fearless. She just loved to run, 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 run. So they were wonderful. It breaks my heart to know that they're not here. They were beautiful children, beautiful children.
What did they call you?
Mimi.
Mimi? And how about Ronnie? What did they call?
Papa.
Do you think Chris loves Shannan?
Oh God, he loved her. Yes, I believe he loved her at first. I believe he did. But I think as the years went on, I think it just being in that kind of a relationship, which the social worker even said that marriage should have ended a long time ago.
Shannan's pregnancy and was what did Chris tell you about that? Was he excited?
No, I don't think he was. I think it was a shock to him. And he said that they have been talking about divorce.
It begins with a silence that felt too heavy for a normal morning. A silence that spread across a quiet Colorado neighborhood like a shadow pulling itself over the sun. Inside a modest home states away, Cindy Watts sat with a growing unease she could neither name nor shake. She had lived through decades of motherhood, scraped knees, teenage moods, rebellious years, but nothing prepared her for this kind of dread. A ringing phone, a trembling voice on the other end, a missing daughter-in-law, missing grandchildren. In that instant, Cindy felt the world tilt. Something wasn't right. Something had been wrong for a very long time. As news spread, as patrol cars rolled up to the Watts home, and as the media began circling like birds sensing a storm, Cindy found herself facing a nightmare she never imagined she would be connected to. One that would expose cracks she had seen but could never prove, warnings she had felt but could never articulate. And beneath it all lay a single, terrifying question. How does a mother watch her son walk into the darkest act imaginable and not see it coming? Because in the days that followed, as investigators uncovered lies, hidden affairs, secret searches, and a double life spiraling into catastrophe, Cindy replayed every moment she'd ever shared with Chris. Every conflict, every uneasiness, every broken conversation, and wondered if the tragedy had been building long before August 2018. A tragedy written in warning signs that no one recognized until it was too late. To understand Cindy Watts' perspective, you must step into the quiet, unremarkable beginnings of the man who would one day shock the world. Christopher Watts was not born into chaos or crime. He grew up in a small North Carolina town, raised by parents who worked hard, lived simply, and believed in structure and stability. Cindy often described him as a shy child, gentle, reserved, almost painfully quiet. He wasn't the type to fight, argue, or rebel. He followed rules without question, slipping through life with a soft voice and even softer presence. To Cindy, Chris was the steady one, reliable, predictable, a son who rarely raised his voice or challenged anyone. But looking back, she sometimes wondered if that quietness was not peace, but suppression. A child who absorbed everything, expressed nothing, and learned early how to hide what he felt. When Chris met Shannan, everything about him changed. Fast. Cindy remembered the day he brought Shannan home. Shannan was confident, outspoken, and driven. She filled every room with her voice and energy. And while Cindy admired her strength, she also sensed a strange imbalance in their dynamic. Chris seemed smaller around her, more withdrawn, like he was folding inward so she could take up the space he no longer occupied. Their marriage grew quickly, perhaps too quickly. New house, new babies, new financial responsibilities. Chris appeared to embrace the new life, but Cindy always sensed a strain beneath the surface. There were family arguments, disagreements, and wounds that never quite healed. The infamous nut incident, the tension around visits, the feeling that she and Ronnie were drifting further from Chris with each passing year. And then came the subtle shift Cindy still struggles to explain. A distance, a coolness, a version of her son she didn't recognize. Phone calls grew shorter. Visits became rare. Conversations felt rehearsed, almost artificial. like Chris was reading lines from a script he didn't believe in. Cindy wondered if he was overwhelmed by fatherhood, by marriage, by financial pressure. She wondered if he was simply tired. But deep down, she felt something else, something heavier. A disconnect she couldn't name. Only later, long after the crime, would she trace that change back to a secret relationship, to a life Chris was building in the shadows, to a fantasy of escape that was growing quietly, dangerously inside him. But in the years before the tragedy, Cindy saw hints of the shift. Moments where his eyes didn't match his smile. Times when he seemed present but not really there. A son drifting away, inch by inch, until he became a stranger she never knew she was losing. And if she had looked closer, if she had asked different questions, could she have recognized the darkness growing beneath the surface? Cindy still wonders, and the world still questions. There are moments a mother remembers for no reason at all, until later, when they become pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. For Cindy Watts, those moments began quietly. The first red flag appeared in the form of distance. Subtle, creeping, almost invisible unless you looked closely. Chris began calling less. He started responding to texts with short, clipped messages that felt cold and mechanical. When they did speak, his voice carried a tone she couldn't identify. Not anger, not anxiety, something else, something hollow. Then came the changes in his appearance. Chris had always been soft-spoken and gentle, someone who drifted through life without drawing attention. But suddenly, he was sculpting his body like a man preparing for a different life. New clothes, new hairstyle, an unfamiliar confidence. He started spending hours at the gym, sometimes leaving at dawn, sometimes late in the evening. His transformation was impressive, but Cindy felt an unease she couldn't quite explain. It didn't feel like self-improvement, felt like escape. There were the odd financial decisions, purchases that made little sense, growing tension between him and Sean and over money, arguments that trickled back to Cindy through fragments, whispers, and comments made in frustration. But Chris never expressed frustration. He never raised his voice. He absorbed everything, like a sponge stretching to its limit. And then, there was his silence. During family visits, Chris seemed distracted, his eyes drifting toward the floor or staring into some distant place only he could see. When he hugged his mother goodbye, the embrace felt shorter, looser, not like the warm, familiar hugs she remembered, but like something forced out of obligation. Cindy tried to explain it away. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he was tired. Maybe fatherhood was heavier than he admitted. But then came the biggest warning sign, the one that still haunts her. He stopped talking about Shannan. In all the years of their marriage, Chris had always spoken about his wife. Her ambitions, her projects, the girls, the schedule, the constant movement of their busy home. But suddenly, Shannan's name slipped from conversation completely, as though he was trying to erase her from his world long before he attempted to erase her from his life. He became guarded when asked about his marriage, evasive when asked about Shannan, empty when asked if everything was okay. There were also the cryptic posts Shannan shared online. Frustrations, hopes for change, concerns about their relationship. Cindy saw them like everyone else, but reading between the lines, she sensed a fracture forming beneath the polished images of family life. And then there was the moment Cindy would never forget. A call where Chris sounded different, his voice low, flat, almost emotionless, as though he were slipping away, piece by piece. She asked if he was all right. He said he was fine, but a mother knows when her child is lying. Looking back, she sees it all clearly. The weight loss, the emotional retreat, the sudden desire for privacy, the unexplained expenses, the quick defensiveness, the new habits and late-night phone activity, the way he talked less and smiled even less. These were not random behaviors. They were signs, warning signs, flags that waved in silence. And Cindy, like so many family members in tragic stories, wonders if noticing them was never the problem, but understanding them was. The morning the world learned what Chris Watts had done, Cindy felt something break inside her before any official words were spoken. News traveled fast, but dread traveled faster. It curled into her stomach like a cold hand gripping her ribs, squeezing tighter with each unanswered call, each news alert, each unfamiliar knock on the door. She didn't know the details yet, but she felt them. The truth didn't arrive gently. It arrived like a blade. When authorities first announced Sean and the girls were missing, Cindy tried to hold on to hope. She told herself there must be an explanation, that Sean had gone somewhere unexpected, that maybe she had simply turned off her phone. Mothers pray even when the odds spit in their faces. But as the investigation deepened, the silence surrounding Chris became too loud. Then came the moment Cindy would never forget. The moment she heard her son's name not as a husband or father, but as a suspect. The country watched in disbelief. The neighbors whispered. The officers whispered louder. And Cindy sat alone in her living room, shaking, as her heart split between two impossible truths: her son and the crime he was accused of. When the confession finally came, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel human. Cindy listened, numb, as Chris described the unthinkable. How he ended the life of his pregnant wife. How he took the innocence of two little girls who loved him without condition. How he drove their small bodies to a remote oil site under a rising sun, while the world slept in ignorance. She couldn't picture her son doing these things. Her quiet, gentle, sensitive boy. But the details left no room for denial. The image of Chris loading his truck in the early morning hours, seen on the neighbor's surveillance camera, haunted her endlessly. The way he moved, the urgency in his steps, the grim finality of his posture, nothing about it resembled the son she had raised. And when she learned where he left the girls, the pain became physical. Small bodies placed in crude oil tanks. A mother's worst nightmare multiplied by 3. A tragedy so violent, so monstrous, that even strangers wept for children they had never met. Cindy replayed his childhood in her mind: birthday parties, school plays, scraped knees. She clung to memories of gentle hugs and quiet conversations, trying to find any clue, any moment, that hinted at what he would one day become. But the truth was cruel. There had been warning signs, but nothing that foreshadowed this level of darkness. Nothing that prepared her for the reality that her own son was capable of wiping out an entire family. His own family, while leaving the world to wonder how a human being could carry such emptiness behind such a calm face. As the nation watched the case unfold, Cindy fell into a silence of her own. One filled with questions she didn't know how to ask, and answers she didn't want to hear. And in the quiet spaces between grief and disbelief, she wondered, had she missed something? Or had something inside Chris simply snapped? As investigators dug deeper into Chris Watt's story, cracks began to form everywhere. His calm behavior, his emotionless interviews, and his strange inconsistencies all pointed to one thing: Chris was hiding something. Police reviewed hours of surveillance footage from neighbors, including the now famous video showing Chris backing his truck into the garage. He claimed he was loading tools for work. But detectives saw something different. A man moving with panic. A man making multiple frantic trips. A man trying to hide a crime. Meanwhile, Nicole Kessinger, who had been dating Chris for weeks, was being questioned too. She insisted she didn't know Chris was planning anything. She said she believed he and Sean were already separating. She said she was as shocked as everyone else. But investigators found internet searches on her phone that made the world pause. Can cops trace text messages? How to prepare for a new life with someone? And most chilling, searches about Sean and Watts before she ever disappeared. The deeper detectives looked, the harder it became to believe that Chris acted alone, or that Nicole knew nothing. The pressure was mounting. The lies were falling apart, and the truth was coming. After days of questioning, failed polygraphs, and mounting evidence, detectives confronted Chris Watts with one final strategy. They brought in his father. The room fell silent as Ronnie Watts sat across from his son, gently asking, "Chris, what happened?" And in that moment, Chris cracked, his voice shaking, He whispered a story detectives immediately knew was a lie. He claimed that Shannan had harmed the children, and in a fit of rage he harmed her. But investigators had already analyzed the crime scene. They had studied the body positions, the timelines, the phone records. Nothing supported Chris's version. Still, the confession opened the door detectives needed. Chris had admitted involvement. It wasn't long before the truth unraveled completely. When forensic teams checked his worksite, the oil tanks, they found heartbreaking evidence of what he had done. Faced with undeniable proof, Chris told the real story. He had murdered Shannan in their bedroom. Then he took the lives of Bella and Celeste. And then he attempted to hide everything at the oil field. This confession shocked the world. The picture of a perfect family man shattered, revealing a man capable of unimaginable darkness. But even with the confession, one question remained. Where did Nicole Kessinger fit into all of this? Was she an innocent girlfriend? Or the silent spark behind the destruction of an entire family? The world wanted answers, and those answers were about to unfold. Long before the world knew the name Chris Watts, long before headlines turned his face into a symbol of betrayal, there was a mother who sensed something was wrong. Cindy Watts had watched her son drift for years, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. To everyone else, he was the calm one, the quiet husband, the steady provider. But to Cindy, something about him felt off. She remembered the small things first, moments that seemed harmless, but in hindsight, revealed fractures beneath the surface. Chris withdrawing from family gatherings, sitting alone for long stretches, responding to conversations with flat, emotionless nods. His smiles felt rehearsed, never fully reaching his eyes. He stopped calling as often, stopped visiting as much, and when he did, he always seemed slightly detached, like he was physically present, but mentally somewhere distant. Cindy thought it was stress, work, marriage, life, the usual pressures every man carries. But then came the bigger cracks, moments she couldn't ignore. There were the tense interactions with Shannan, arguments Chris never defended himself in, decisions about the children, finances, and family dynamics that he followed, but didn't participate in. It was as though Chris had learned to disappear inside his own home. Cindy worried he lacked a voice, a backbone, that he bottled things up until they became something dangerous. She even confided to friends that she feared her son was hiding something, though she could never articulate exactly what. To her, Chris was slipping away, not into violence, but into numbness, and numbness can be just as dangerous. She sensed that he was capable of shutting down emotionally, cutting people off, cutting himself off without warning. But even in her darkest fears, she never imagined this. Never imagined her son's emptiness could implode into something so catastrophic, something that would take the lives of the people he was supposed to love, protect, and cherish. Cindy would later say, there were warning signs, she just didn't know how to read them, and now, the consequences were irreversible. Cindy Watts always tried to give her son grace. Chris had been the shy kid, the quiet teenager, the easygoing adult who rarely caused trouble. He wasn't the type to explode, and he wasn't the type to yell. But that was exactly what terrified her, because silence can hide storms far more dangerous than anger ever could. As the years passed, Cindy began to notice an unsettling pattern in Chris, one that only a mother would recognize. He avoided conflict to the point of self-erasure. He agreed to things he didn't want. He apologized even when he wasn't wrong. He changed his personality to fit whoever stood beside him. And if he ever disagreed, it stayed inside him like a swallowed stone. To Cindy, this wasn't humility. It was suppression. She worried that Chris didn't know how to process negative emotions at all. When he felt trapped, he didn't speak up, he shut down. And during her visits with him and Shannan, she saw that shutdown happening more frequently. There were moments, fleeting but chilling, where she looked into her son's eyes and didn't recognize the man behind them. He seemed drained, distant, unreachable. Cindy once described it as a glaze, something cold and heavy settling over his expression, a look that said he was present in body only. And then came the family tension, the arguments, the unresolved conflicts that deepened the divide between Cindy and Shannan. Cindy tried to mend it, but Chris never took a stand. Not for his wife, not for his mother, not even for himself. He avoided the issue entirely, withdrawing deeper into himself. Behind closed doors, Cindy worried her son was living two lives. The smiling husband the world saw, and the silent, disconnected version he saved for the shadows. She questioned whether he was overwhelmed, whether he was breaking under responsibilities he never admitted he struggled with, whether he was trying to be perfect for everyone but himself. But she never imagined the truth. She never imagined that her son's silence, his emotional void, his years of bottled tension, would all collide with devastating force. She knew something was wrong. She felt something was coming, but every warning, every fear, every instinct was too late. The more Cindy watched her son, the more she sensed him drifting, slowly, quietly, and without explanation. It began with small changes, subtle shifts in his behavior that might seem insignificant to anyone else, but not to a mother. Chris had always been predictable. The steady routine, the soft-spoken disposition, the gentle presence. But suddenly, his routines changed. His responses changed. He changed. Phone calls became shorter. Conversations became surface level. And when Cindy asked him direct questions, he answered like a man reading from a script, detached, monotone, guarded. She tried to tell herself he was simply stressed. The kids were young. Finances were tight. Work was demanding. But there was something else, something darker, and Cindy felt it every time she spoke to him. He was hiding from her, from Sean, and maybe even from himself. During their last visit together, she noticed how jumpy he seemed, how quickly he checked his phone, how his eyes flickered with guilt at messages he refused to open in front of anyone. Cindy didn't know the truth yet, but a mother doesn't need proof to sense a lie. What frightened her the most was the emptiness in him. Not anger, not resentment, just absence. He wasn't engaged with his children the way he used to be. He wasn't affectionate with Shannan. He wasn't even connected to his own life. It was as if he were rehearsing for an exit only he knew about. When Cindy hugged him goodbye that last summer visit, she felt his shoulders stiffen. No warmth, no return of affection, just a cold, distant tension. That night she confided to a close friend that something was wrong with her son. Terribly wrong. She feared he was slipping into a place she couldn't reach, spiraling toward a breaking point she couldn't name. Still, she never imagined the magnitude of the collapse. She never imagined the secret life he was already constructing, or the catastrophic choices that would follow. She saw the shift, but she didn't know it was the beginning of the end. When the courtroom fell silent and the final sentence was read, something inside Cindy shattered. The weight of the verdict didn't just crush her. It reshaped her entire world. Her son, the quiet boy she raised, the young man she believed she knew better than anyone, was now a convicted murderer. For the families of Sean and Bella and Celeste, the sentencing marked the beginning of grief that would last a lifetime. For Cindy, it marked the beginning of a different kind of torment, a relentless, suffocating interrogation of the past. She replayed every moment of Chris's childhood, every birthday, every school achievement, every quiet conversation when he would sit beside her, gentle and soft-spoken. She searched for signs she might have missed, clues that her son was capable of something so monstrous. But the truth was far more painful. There had been signs, small, quiet, dismissed. She remembered how he used to retreat into silence when overwhelmed, how he struggled to express emotion, how easily he hid behind calmness. And she wondered, had those warning signs been whispers of a storm she never prepared for? In the months after his sentencing, Cindy stood in the shadow of a tragedy so enormous it felt impossible to comprehend. Every headline hurt. Every documentary reopened wounds. Every comment online accused her of raising a monster. But despite the accusations, despite the public judgment, one truth remained. She lost her family, too. She lost her grandchildren. She lost her daughter-in-law. She lost the son she thought she knew. And she lost the life she once lived, replaced by endless questions that gnawed at her every night. Could she have stopped him? Should she have intervened when she noticed he was changing? Was there a moment, just one, where a different conversation could have altered everything? She would never have the answers, only the haunting certainty that warning signs, no matter how faint, matter. And sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Chris Watts would live out his sentence far from the world he destroyed. But Cindy would live with the aftermath forever, trapped in a reality where a mother's intuition came too late. And for the rest of us, the story stands as a chilling reminder. Evil often whispers before it screams. And the ones who hear the whisper are the ones who suffer the most when the truth finally explodes. This story forces us to confront a question that echoes long after the case files close. How well do we truly know the people we love? And how much of their darkness do we choose not to see? If you found this episode gripping, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Shadow of Deceit for more dark, immersive true crime storytelling. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload.